Good evening, everyone. My name is Trinice Bryant. I am the board chair for the Miami Workers Center. As the chair of the board, I would like to welcome you all to our home. I would like to first thank our panelists, comprised of author of and activist Junot Diaz, Edwidge Danticat, FIU law professor Ediberto Roman, and Florida Immigration Coalition Executive Director Maria Rodriguez, who will also be our moderator for tonight. I would also like to thank you all for attendance today and taking our time and joining us to learn more about our issues that is impacting our neighborhoods and in the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and right here at home. The Miami Workers Center was established in 1999, and its mission and has always continued to be an organized and developed consciousness leadership within Miami's working class community for economics, gender, and racial equality. We understand the impact that global issues have on the communities we serve, which is why we thought it was imperative for Miami's community to not just learn, but understand the immigration ethnic cleansing crisis taking place very close to home. Additionally, serving communities of color, we have all had very personal experiences with this systematic violence in the United States against Black and brown communities, which is why we would like to discuss how this event takes place in the Dominican Republic, collaborates the violence witnesses and experience every day in our communities here at home. We also want to address what the implications are and what the solutions and solidarity will look like tonight. With that being said, I would like to leave you and introduce to you the Miami Workers Center Project Director, Marcia Olivia.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Marcia Olivo, como dijo Trinice, y yo nací y crecí en la República Dominicana. Mis padres todavía viven allá, mi familia inmediata todavía está en la República Dominicana. Yo también le quiero agradecer inmensamente que estén aquí hoy como una muestra de amor, de solidaridad y de resistencia. Muchas gracias por estar aquí hoy, especialmente en un momento mostrando solidaridad, resistencia y amor con nuestros hermanos haitianos y dominico-haitianos y con la comunidad negra, especialmente en un momento cuando es tan difícil ser negro en cualquier parte del mundo. Muchas gracias por estar aquí. También, antes de que nosotros empecemos, tenemos unas cuantas acuerdos que quisiera que hiciéramos para asegurarnos que estamos en la misma página y que todos estamos aquí, como yo decía, como una muestra de amor, solidaridad y respeto. Good evening. Let me try my English. My name is Marcia Olivo. I was born and raised in the Dominican Republic. My family, my immediate family is still there back in DR. And I also, like Trinice was saying, we want to thank you for being here today, for being part of this event, and for being here. I'm making an assumption that we are all are here showing solidarity, resistance, and love for the Haitian community and for the Black community in general, especially at a time when being Black is dangerous anywhere in the world. And before I hand it off to Maria, we have some ground rules on some agreements that for the discussion tonight. First is that bathrooms are over there in that corner. What size is that? On my left. Bathrooms are on my left. Also, if you are going to be doing social media, which we would love if you do that, if you can tag the Miami Workers Center, and here are the hashtags that we're going to be using, Dominican Republic and Miami for Dominican-Haitians, and tag the Miami Workers Center. Y lo más importante, si usted está aquí esta noche con la intención de interrumpir este espacio, o con la intención de traer odio a este espacio, if you are here tonight with the intention of disrupting this space or to bring hate into this space, yo le estoy preguntando que en este momento salga del espacio. I am asking you to please leave the room now. If you are here, again, with the intention of disrupting this meeting or bringing hate into this space, please leave now. If you don't do so, we have a group of strong. Where are my ladies? In the back. Miss Yvonne, Serena, Miss Yvonne, Serena, T, and who are the other ones? Ruth. So these peaceful but strong ladies are going to show you the door if you are here with that intention. In case that doesn't work for you and you don't know how to respect the leadership of women, so we're going to have our brothers and sisters in the back somewhere here that they're also going to show you how to do it. So si usted no sabe respetar, nosotros vamos a tener, si usted está aquí con la intención de hacer daño, le pedimos que se vaya y si no lo hace, tenemos un grupo de personas aquí, de mujeres específicamente, que le van a enseñar la puerta. En caso de que usted sea de los que no respetan el liderazgo de las mujeres, vamos a tener entonces un grupo de hombres por ahí atrás que le van a enseñar cómo es que se respeta a las mujeres. With that said, I'm going to hand it off to Maria.
Bonsoir, buenas tardes, good evening. What a great opportunity, and thank you, Miami, for being here in this important conversation. Todos los que hablan español están en posición para recibir esta conversación. Este espacio es un espacio democrático lingüístico, así que aquí se puede hablar en creol, español, portañol, anything else.
Para quienes necesitan interpretación, desafortunadamente solo tenemos interpretación de inglés a español. Si necesitan interpretación, vayan, Adrian, raise your hand. Vayan con Adrián y él tiene el equipo. We only have interpretation from English and Spanish, so if you need interpretation from English and Spanish, go with Adrian. He has the equipment back there.
So I want to thank the leadership of this organization, the Miami Workers Center. In case you didn't know, this is a historic organization here in Miami that has broken ground on housing issues, human rights issues, and a variety of other issues. But from the get-go, really was intentional about building unity between the Black, African American, Haitian, and Latino communities. And if you are from Miami, you know the value of what that represents. So thank you to the leadership of the Miami Workers Center, and welcome to their new home. This conversation tonight is part of a series of conversations that the social movements in Miami, and yes, there are social movements in Miami, so if you're not connected, today's the day, tonight's the night to connect. Organizations have been leading conversations around exclusion, racism, state violence, criminalization. I lead one of the organizations that forms part of that ecology, the Florida Immigrant Coalition. And we believe that we can come together for the fair treatment of all people. We also believe in the radical, transformative power of inclusion, whether that is access to human rights or whether that's protections and expansion of freedoms. And I invite you to look at floridaimmigrant.org to join and to connect. This is a special conversation tonight because we don't often have literary leaders and legal leaders be part of these conversations when we have them. And so it's special tonight. So for the next hour and a half, we're going to get a sense of what's going on in the Dominican Republic from Ediberto Roman, who's one of the founding faculty members of the School of Law at Florida International University, and from two recognized and beloved authors, Elwidge Danticat, the author of Claire of the Sea Light, among many others, and Junot Diaz, the author of The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde and This Is How You Lose Her. We kept the bios brief, but we're very grateful to the three panelists tonight. Without further ado, the order of the program will be Ediberto giving us a lay of the land, where we'll look at issues of citizenship, statelessness, ethnic cleansing. Then Elwidge and Junot will lead us in a conversation, and we'll open it up for questions. In case people have to leave early, a very important piece of our social movement, in addition to building consciousness and solidarity, is creating action. Action to dismantle the systems of oppression. And before people leave, and we'll talk a little bit at the end, tomorrow there is a march. It's one of many different actions that are happening, or efforts that are happening, but it starts at 2 o'clock. And it'll go from the Dominican Republic Consulate at 1038 Brickell Avenue to the Haitian Consulate at 259 Southwest 13th Street. There'll be also a tweet storm that we'll be part of, but we'll go back to that at the end. I just want to make sure that for people who are leaving to know that this is part of an ongoing effort. Before I turn it over to the professor, we have a basket going around. We were, encouraged to get a security detail for this conversation tonight. Unfortunately, it's become so polarized. There's been a lot of hatred, as you know, being spewed. And the hatred is, unfortunately, not just in the Dominican Republic. It's sadly a global crisis that's also an opportunity to name and recognize that. So we are passing the hat for donations. We'd love to have $5 if you can. That will support the cost of the security detail. Thank you so much. If we agree, that would be great. The three objectives tonight, and I walked through a little bit, is really to deepen and advance our understanding of all of the dimensions of what's happening in the Dominican Republic. It's not just an immigrant issue. We want to deepen the understanding of the historic, systemic, and economic dimensions of the crisis. We also want to understand and name that this is part of a globalized, anti-Black expression that is happening. And we say it clearly and explicitly, and it's completely connected to the massacre in Charleston, to the killing of Black men, and the current moment of beautiful resistance and inspiration that we're living. And then the third item is to create solidarity and unity, in particular with sensitivity to the lives of women and girls. So those are the guiding principles, but we'll soon enough turn over the conversation to all of us. So, Ediberto, what the hell is going on?
Well, that's a good
¿Qué coño pasa?
That's a good way to put it, by the way. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank the center for not only organizing this, but being with these three amazing panelists in terms of the work they do, and just the turnout in terms of all the beautiful faces that are here, and just the sheer number. It's truly impressive. So I hope you would acknowledge yourselves at some point with respect to that. But let me bring it back in terms of what this issue is about, and I'm trying to address it in a way that's accessible, but also in a way that those of us here that may be versed in the law can have an understanding of it. And feel free afterwards, when there is a Q&A, if you have specific questions, feel free to ask me or the other panelists about this, because I'm going to try to set it forth. And I'm talking well over a century of issues in terms of violence and desperate treatment between one of those rare scenarios in the world where we have two countries sharing the same island. And there are other instances, but they tend to be satellite aspects of these countries. And that's in part some of the tension and some of the vestiges of colonialism. But let me bring it back to the more recent manifestations. What we're looking at basically is something that occurred in 2013, where a new court in the Dominican Republic was created, part of a constitutional revision, a constitutional court. And in that decision, this was part of an ongoing process that was both in the domestic courts as well as the international courts, where there were issues with respect to the history of Dominicans of Haitian descent in terms of getting birth certificates or documentation analogous to that in terms of the ability to work, to go to school. So in this decision in 2013, the High Court of the Dominican Republic basically interpreted the Constitution of the Dominican Republic, and it was a changed constitution. That's the highest law of the land, the Constitution of that country, to say that basically the two classic forms, and this occurs in the United States as well and most Western societies, the two classic ways to become a citizen is to be born of a citizen of that country, i.e. if your mother or father are a citizen, you become a citizen, or the other classic way, and these are fancy Latin terms, jus solis citizenship, to be born in the land. And most Western democracies recognize that, and except for those that have had horrific histories like Germany and other locales in terms of that. So what we're looking at in 2013, because this debate was characterized as an immigration debate, the court basically held that anyone born in the Dominican Republic does not automatically become a citizen of the Dominican Republic. There's a problem with that, all right? The problem with that is the Constitution of the Dominican Republic said otherwise, okay? The relevant Constitution of the Dominican Republic, not the most recent one that was changed in 2010 that referred back to a 1929 Constitution, held that if you are born in the country or if you are born of parents that are citizens, you are a citizen. And there was a clause there that basically said, unless you are in transit, which was interpreted repeatedly to mean if you are a son or daughter of a diplomat. So what the court in the Dominican Republic did in 2013 said that the people that were there were in transit since 1929, all right? And I'm glad you laugh at it, because that's exactly what the Inter-American Court on Human Rights did when it addressed this issue in 2005. These are repeated efforts that the Dominican Republic has tried to alienate its own people because of constructions of hate and race and colonialism and vestiges of that. So they did away with this. They did away with jus solis citizenship. They did away with it, not just going forward. And a country has a right to do that, which would be absurd, but it has a right to do that. They did away with jus solis citizenship, birthright citizenship, not only for new people born, i.e. after the date of the decision. They went back nearly 100 years. They went back 100 years. So we have generations of Dominicans that viewed themselves as Dominicans in no other country other than the Dominican Republic. And just because one group of brown people are basically expressing hatred against a slightly darker brown people, right, in terms of the shared experiences of those groups. They tortured their constitution, they violated every principle, and I can list them all, frankly, every principle of classic statutory interpretation, constitutional interpretation, common law, logic, common sense, human rights, and have been sanctioned for this, but they don't care. Because one of the consequences of what they did, and these issues are directly relevant to the U.S. I tend to ramble, so let me know if I go over.
I'm wondering
Okay.
if, as you finish that thought, if you can just talk about what to expect in the next period.
Right.
And then we'll
That's
transition.
exactly where I'm going.
Okay.
So what has happened basically, that they've left, and by Amnesty International's estimations and the reports they've done, over 200,000 individuals are left without any rights. And when you lose your citizenship rights, in one stroke of a pen, these citizens were made to be immigrants. And the narrative, both in terms of the Dominican Republic and other discussions, is that this is an immigration issue. It is not an immigration issue. It is a citizenship issue. It is a constitutional law issue based on their own laws, not based on principles in the U.S. Based on Dominican law, they are violating their principle. They're violating their constitution. They are also violating human rights norms. They signed on to the American Convention on Human Rights. They are violating every principle of that, against racism, against statelessness. When you lose your citizenship, you lose every right. And these people are left without the country they were born with and are going to be deported to a country they don't know. So they are going to be the worst of all people. And as some of you know, concentration camps are being built on the Dominican side. There are 7 in total in terms of the discussion to round up these individuals. And some of the most horrific examples of human rights violation in world history started like this, to basically silence a group, to make them an other, to remove them of all their rights. And what has happened thus far, they've been condemned by CARICOM, International Trade Organization. But then what happened is that the Dominican Republic and Haiti decided to engage in bilateral conversations, brokered by the U.S. By the way, no one knew what was going on in those conversations. And all we know, as a result of those conversations, nothing has changed. Okay, so in terms of what we do now, I think the other panelists will address some of those issues and those narratives, but also in the Q&A, we can talk about getting transparency to these issues and try to bring back the rights the people deserved in the first place.
Thank you so much. And we'll get a chance to have maybe a deeper questions. The purpose of this conversation, beyond information, is really to have a space of reflection so we can advance our understanding. There are some chairs that may be vacant. Raise your hand if there are any vacant chairs, because I know there's a couple chairs over here if people want to take a moment to migrate over there. Yeah, migration is a natural and historic phenomena. The forced displacement of people is not driven by racism, climate change, poverty, restructure of economy. And here in this country, there is also a vigorous state violence-sponsored or state violent-led detention and deportation machinery, of which some of it is driven by profit. Let's take a deep breath. And let's invite Edwidge to come and share. Edwidge, let's make believe that this is Perejil. 20 years ago you wrote about Perejil in the framing of the bones. What are your feelings about this moment that we're living in?
Well, first of all, bonsoir tout le monde. Je voulais dire tout le monde merci qui venu là après-midi pour supporter nous là. I think it's tough. Je voulais dire merci avec Miami's Workers Center parce que you fait programme là soir. Good evening to everybody. I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank the Miami Workers Center. And I especially want to thank the professor and Junot. Junot is having a very busy week here, and he said not to talk about that, but thank you. The Perejil is is a historical, I guess, artifact that I guess speaks to a little bit of sort of the fine line that we are trying to walk here. In 1937, during the massacre of Haitians in the Dominican Republic that was ordered by Trujillo, it was so hard to tell people apart that they were asked to say perejil, and you could tell by the way I'm saying it, I wouldn't have lived. If people were not unable to trill their R's, then they were killed. But I want to, of course, we are living a moment of historical reimagining, historical scars. But I want to use my time to talk a little bit also about just what people that I speak to on the ground have been telling me to just kind of bring you up to date. So, of course, things are tense. A lot of people are in hiding. A lot of people are afraid to go out since this deadline has passed. And places in Santo Domingo especially that used to be very busy with different merchants and so forth are pretty much isolated. And a lot of people are returning by themselves, especially more recent migrants have decided out of fear that they're returning. And the numbers that have been thrown out range from 12 to 20,000 of such people who are quote unquote self-deporting. And a lot of the images you see a lot of women and very small children and people who look very disoriented when they get there. I think it's important to also point out that there are two situations here. There are two groups of people. There are the groups of people who are more recent migrants, people who have gone to the Dominican Republic to work, and then there's the group of Dominicans of Haitian descent. And people keep asking me, like, well, why didn't the people who are Dominicans of Haitian descent register sooner than the mass group of people that we saw? A lot of them didn't register sooner because registering in the regularization plan meant that they would have been saying, well, I'm a foreigner, that they would have been basically stripping themselves of this citizenship that is rightfully theirs by just showing up and registering as a foreigner with no guaranteed really path to citizenship. Another thing people have been asking is why there's such a silence of these states and local states and these larger bodies like CARICOM who were so vocal after the decision. And part of the reason is that they're deporting people themselves. And so we're not hearing, say, from these states that were so vocal before anything about recent events. There also, what I'm hearing, that people there who say that the deportations are happening, and not the massive way yet, but that they're happening in bits, sometimes at night, but that they're happening to, like any soldier on the street can pick up a group of people and just bring them if you look Haitian. And there have been reports of people saying that they even people with their papers, they'll tear up their papers and still send them back. Now, the reception centers that the Haitian governments have been promising us still remains these empty fields with tractors on them. What is prepared is what the professor has said, is that these old forts, basically, that are like prisons that are on the borders, is probably what are these so-called welcome centers, is where a lot of people will end up. So, to wrap up, we'll have a longer conversation maybe during the Q&A. But to wrap up, it's like all issues. There's so much horror happening in the world. This too can likely fade in the minds of people, and it's important to keep the pressure on. And if we don't think this concerns us, we're crazy. And if we're not concerned, we should be, especially when we live in a town where most of us here came from somewhere else and would not have had the opportunities that we have had if there were, even with the sort of screwed up immigration system that we're always fighting here, but if there was no fight back, then some of us would not have had the opportunities that we've had. So it's important to keep the pressure on. And I was heartened to see that there was the march today or yesterday in the Dominican Republic where in spite of the fear, in spite of the intimidation, thousands of people came out and marched to demand their right so that their citizenship can be acknowledged. So we're asking the same of you. We're asking your solidarity. We're asking for you to keep this in the forefront of your mind so that it doesn't fade, because this horror, whether we're watching or not, will continue to go on. Thank you.
Both you and Edwidge have used your platform, your voices, and your pens to speak out, not just about this, but in broader on other issues. Can you just talk about what motivates you on that, and what have your statements been?
Actually, I think, first of all, thank you to the Workers' Center. Thank you for all of you who are here. I wanted to thank my colleagues, of course. Tremendous interventions, and every folk who made time to be here. Everyone who made time to be here, thank you so much for coming. Traffic was no joke. Yeah. First question I always ask, but this one takes even greater resonance. How many folks here are of Haitian descent? Anyone? How many folks here of Dominican descent? Good. Yeah, man. So I just returned from the Dominican Republic. I was there all last week during the period when the end of the waiting period. This was when, this was when supposedly the mass deportations were going to begin. Spent the week running around. I can sort of just give you a little bit of just on the ground description, and then just move into some larger comments that might be useful. Some larger comments that might be useful. First of all, the situation, people are politely describing it in various different ways, but in Santo Domingo, there is a state of terror. There's absolutely no question that there is a state of terror in the Dominican Republic, that this is something that has been promulgated and cultivated by the interface of political elites, by the interface of military and police, and finally, of course, by the elite-controlled media. Anyone who's interested in studying media studies, this is a nightmarish case in how local and quote-unquote indigenous media can be used to render an entire community terrified and an entire community silent. Many of the sectors that would normally be incredibly vocal and active in this front find themselves fearing not only for their safety, but for their family's safety. Many of the folks who early on in this struggle, who were standing up to the Dominican Republic, the government's sort of insanity, found themselves having to flee their homes. Many of them found themselves having to go in hiding. Many of them found themselves receiving all sorts of death threats. And I think that what we must remember is that the global aspect of this that has been underscored here must be reiterated. That the Dominican Republic's activities are not in of themselves simply isolated. That this has taken a whole long time to get this nightmare on the road. And certainly the largest of the United States sort of, hegemonic bosses, the United States, has spent the last decade or so in just deporting people and shattering communities like it is free. And at a global level, this has been general. The immigrant body is viewed, even among many allies, as certainly not worthy of the kind of attention that would be brought to quote-unquote citizen bodies. Obama has been deporting folks for the last, God knows, 6, 7 years by the thousands. And Europe has built itself into an enormous fortress, all the bodies that are dying in the Mediterranean Sea, and you see the same exact things happening in Australia and New Zealand. All of the places that have fattened themselves with their asymmetrical neoliberal policies have now created this situation where the crime is not capitalism or neoliberalism. The crime are these bodies who are attempting to save themselves from the ruin inflicted by other people. So what we have in the Dominican Republic is, I think, an incredibly this is very, very, very important. What we have in the Dominican Republic on the island is what we have is kind of the perfect example of all of these tendencies, all of these trends intersecting. A national community, international community that has become totally indifferent to the rights, to the humanity of anyone they designate as immigrants. Whether it's North Africans, Africans, folks from Turkey trying to get into Europe, whether it's Asian communities dispersing by boats trying to arrive, whether it's across this one border, the problem remains that as an international community, the indifference to immigrant bodies is extensive. And I think Edwidge's comments are really, really important, that across the board, there's very little political will, because the practice of immigrant hating is, the metaphysics of immigrant hating is very important to these regimes. Now, the local vision of this is that what is happening in the Dominican Republic is an action, it's a set of policies put into motion by a political party called the PLD, the PLD. The PLD has had power in the Dominican Republic for almost 20 years. The corruption of its leadership is legendary, absolutely legendary. They continue to find ways to get themselves reelected, and, for example, the next election, the PLD has made a pact with the opposition party, like literally has made a deal: you guys don't run against us and we'll give you X, Y, and Z. That's the kind of democratic sort of fragility that we're talking about. And what's happening in the Dominican Republic with this is that the PLD is mobilizing media and mobilizing many of its functionaries to conflate what it is pursuing, these super fucked up, just diabolically racist policies, conflating its policies, what it has spent 30 or 40 years engineering, with the Dominican nation. So it is wrapping itself up in the Dominican flag and saying any criticism of this party and any criticism of its policies is an attack on the Dominican Republic. And it has been incredibly successful at hiding its morbid, dread, rotting hand and turning this into these just baffling conversations about, well, y'all just hate Dominicans and y'all just attacking this nation, instead of focusing on that it is a group of people who have been trying to pull this off since the time of Balaguer. We had the demonic US-backed, post-dictatorship President Balaguer, who the US helped put into office, and Balaguer and his think tanks actually floated this idea back in the 70s, and even Balaguer, who was too terrifying, even he was a terrifying figure, he couldn't pull the trigger on it. He was like, this is too crazy. Like, for real. It says a lot about where we've come as an international community, where the stakes of human rights, where we all are about our tolerance for the massive deportation of racialized bodies. just collectively, that a nation and a political party like this can feel itself actually comfortable in trying to pull this damn thing off. And finally, you must know, of course, that Haiti is under occupation. Haiti is occupied. It says it's the United Nations, but it is the U.S. All right? Listen, Haiti's occupied, right? They have found enormous mineral wealth. This is not a conspiracy walking around. They have found enormous mineral wealth. And if you look at the triangulation of power, what's going on that poor island, all the folks that we're talking about, whether we're talking about undocumented workers or we're talking about Dominican citizens who this PLD is attempting to disenfranchise because just a few years ago, a local version of what we would call the Arab Spring occurred, what was called the 4% movement, where you suddenly had even the kids of rich families, you had all sorts of young people across the nation protesting against the government's impunity, the government's corruption, coalitions that you'd never seen with Haitian migrants, with rich kids from like the best neighborhoods, and they were all gathering together to attack this government, to attack this regime, and then a couple years later, they throw this at us. And it has been the most incredibly divisive, it has been incredibly successful as a wedge issue to shatter these nascent solidarities. And so when you think about it, and I'll leave it here, with the intersection of where these controls come, you have Haiti under occupation. Yeah? You have U.S. corporations who are so deeply involved in mineral extraction on both sides of the island. Yeah? You have Dominican and Haitian elites who don't give a fuck about Haitians of any kind. They don't give a fuck. They feel more comfortable dealing with occupation authorities and dealing with corporations than they care about the bodies of the people that they claim to represent and serve. And when you lock these factors out, what we're looking at is not only are people being exposed by judicial fiat, not only are they being made vulnerable by judicial fiat, there is no sector besides human rights people and people on the ground doing this work who are defending these vulnerable communities, because none of these people have anything at stake. In fact, there's a lot at stake at keeping conversations of human rights away from an island where vast amounts of extraction is happening. The largest mineral corporations in Canada are on the island, just pulling gold out of there like it is free. And just so you know, Bonao, la gente de Bonao conocen bien, yeah, lo que está pasando Bonao, and we'll leave it here, just to show you the absolute sense that it doesn't make a difference. In their minds, they think that they have won. All of these factors, including the other Caribbean nations who want to be able to avail themselves of the same cruel impunity. Next year, when the community of Caribbean nations gathers, who is the host state? The very president who put this policies in motion, Danilo Medina, offered up the Dominican Republic as the place where all of these nations can gather and pat each other in the back and eat really well, and this group agreed. They just are completely indifferent. And this is why all of this matters. This is why if we do not begin to practice the muscles of having a possessive investment in each other's oppressions, we are in some serious trouble. And I leave you, I think it is no accident that the first, and I use this term not in our traditional sense, but the first nations of the New World, the first places that everything that we call modernity gets beta tested, the future of our destruction is being given a dry run. Because if you don't think what the Dominican Republic is doing in the Dominican Republic with these political parties, if you don't think a whole bunch of other polities are going to avail themselves of this. We must begin to practice the muscles, because it starts at the First Nation, and before we know it, it's happening everywhere. It already is, but you know what I mean. Thank you.
So we'll open it up, and I'll take the prerogative of maybe the first question or comment. Okay. So we started to hear, we clearly heard the white supremacy and racism being central to this, and Junot brought in the extractive waves of colonialism. The first Quisqueya ripped apart by the French and the Spaniards, and the globalization, which promotes the free flow of capital, but people are criminalized. So that's where we live, in these intersection of oppressions, but there's also a beautiful invitation to look at what's the resistance and what's the liberation. What are the opportunities around liberation? Where's the hope and where's the dismantling? So if I could just get a brief comment from the panelists, and then we'll open it up. In the meantime, you can get your comments ready. So you mentioned there's some resistance going on in the Dominican Republic. I mean, is there opportunities there that can be seized? How do we build solidarity there? The Haitian community here, how is it connected to the global diaspora? Are there any spaces there that we can look at resistance and growing the resistance and liberation?
Well, there's always been resistance and movements that actually are solidarity movements. While this whole thing has been happening, I've been thinking almost every day of Sonia Pierre, who was the executive director, sort of the soul of this movement, really. I keep wondering, I said, what would Sonia want us to do? She was, her group was called MUDA, the movement of Haitian Dominican women, and they're young, the Recosinido, there's a lot of resistance. Unfortunately, often they're drowned out by sort of the ultra-nationalist voices, but there's always been these movements on the ground, movements of solidarity, and just people who've been working on this for a long time have almost foreseen this. I mean, this is not the first time that we've had these deportations. In the 1990s, there were some large numbers. It's the first time that you've had the sort of the full power of the law behind it. But this is not the first time, and there's the resistance continues. There are people on the ground. I think that's important also for them to know. The other day, just a cute example, a young woman that I'm in touch with, who's a novelist there, sent me back a video, and it's a video of a group in New York called We're All Dominican that they made, and they made this video to try to get people here to understand what it would be like to just wake up and have your citizenship taken. And my friend in the Dominican Republic, she's like, have you seen this? And I said, of course I have, but they were so heartened by this response from here, and it was very encouraging to them. That's just one example, but it's also important to them, people who are working on the ground, so they're not hopeless, they're not helpless, they are resisting, they are fighting, but it's also important that they feel our support.
Yeah, there's a question around the impact of women. I think we're opening it up, the mics, unless anybody else on the panel would like to open up to mic to questions. First questions or comments? Sin miedo. Go ahead in the back.
My question is, if this happens to the Jewish people in Germany, what's the difference between what's going on to the Haitian people in Haiti to the Jews also in Germany? Pretty much what's the same process, it's a early stage of fascism in Germany.
The question is compare, contrast what's happening in Dominican Republic with what happened with the Jews in Germany and the ethnic cleansing under fascism.
Well, I've actually written on this, and the laws you're referring to were the Nuremberg laws, and they stripped the citizenship of German Jews, and that was the first in the step of the ethnic cleansing and the Holocaust that occurred. So the analogy is direct, because what they did is overnight basically said anyone that wasn't of Aryan descent was no longer a German citizen. Here, what they're saying, notwithstanding what the Constitution says, you no longer are citizen, even though you were born in the country that allowed you citizenship by birth out. So the analogy is direct. The reaction I typically get when I either write this or say this is usually by someone from the consulate being so offended by it. But by the same token, look at what happened there. The stripping of citizenship, the creation of concentration camps. Will there be mass killings? I don't foresee that, but will there be significant number of killings like we've seen under Trujillo? I do foresee that in terms of those efforts, and I want to say, I wanted to echo Mr. Diaz's comments. That's a plan that's going to be implemented here. We had a presidential candidate that asked for self-deportation. This is self-deportation on steroids, and if it succeeds and if we're quiet about it, it's going to go here.
And Professor, just to add one little thing to this, so you all remember, is that when this analogy gets made, what the ultra-nationalist defenders will say is that no, this was in the Constitution all along, we just happened to misread it. Like literally, they're like, no, we're not stripping anyone of anything. It's just that everybody before, for the last 80 years, has happened to have misread. And so I think that it's important to recall the difference of the Nazis were at least like, fuck you. We're going to be proud of what we're doing. What we currently have is that new mode of racism without racists. They want to commit the fucking act, but they don't actually want to live with the consequences or the infamy. Which is why if anybody who's in any kind of Dominican, like Twitter, or you got anybody on Facebook, there's all this circulation of the Dominican flag and this statement, no somos racistas, we're not racist. Because there's a campaign to kind of obscure and obfuscate this entire issue, because even in the Dominican Republic, racism without racists is the law of the land.
We're familiar with that. Okay, let's see. The sister in the red shirt, and then the striped shirt over here, the sister over here, and then we'll take three. Okay.
We need to.
Can I suggest we take, there's a lot of hands up. I'm going to suggest we take 2 or 3 questions, and then we'll have a response if that's okay, because I want to make sure everybody gets a voice.
Can I say something about the mining?
Sure.
Regarding the mining firms, so in Haiti right now, I mean, Junot is very right. Our president is ruling by decree, and has been since January. So a lot of these mining contracts, even before they were ruling by decree, because the parliament kept scaling down, were just given out to people without any kind of legal system in place. So even, there's recently this whole thing where the Clintons were involved, where Hillary's, or one of the Clinton brother, just who's not even in the business, got one of those contracts. So that part of it is very real, and the historical echoes is that you had in the early 20th century, 1915 through 1916, 1924 in the Dominican Republic, 1950, 1930 in Haiti, where these sort of U.S. businesses, where they want something, they'll find somewhere to take it, and the whole U.S. border program is run out of the U.S. Embassy. With they train these border guards, the equipment, and so forth. So when people get upset, it's like, it's not your business, but you are very implicated in all of this too, because your tax dollars is sort of fruiting some of this.
I was wondering if any of this takes the Haitian refugees out of like economic refugee status, the political status. Will the U.S. got an eyelash about the wet foot, dry foot policy? Or is that anticipated at all?
Professor? Well, I guess we'll only care when the collective we, the government and the apparatus finances are affected. So when and it's something I wrote about 2 years ago in terms of prediction that nothing will happen, and only when we see mass migration and people, not so much, I don't think frankly the people dying on our seas will be of a concern, or migration to Bermuda and other countries that have their own problems. But it is when it's going to affect our pocketbook, then there's the possibility of change. But there'll be a lot of debate. So I think there may be temporary protective status depending on who is in office, frankly. My view of it, we have a Republican, whoever that may be, and a Republican light on the Democratic side. So I don't see many prospects for any significant reform here, certainly on a permanent basis.
Go ahead. Yes.
Thank you. My question is, several times you mentioned careful consultation. I'm wondering
Can you repeat that again?
Okay. In this presentation, you mentioned the camp of concentration camp in Dominican Republic location. Where are located? I would like to know, because that is really serious.
Well, the internet is a wonderful place.
The question is the location of the concentration camp.
And there is a little magazine called The Nation.
No, but in the country where, in which part?
Well, if you look it up, you could.
I really would like to go and see
Yeah,
that.
the Nation magazine had a report just 2 days ago on the locales and identifies the actual cities.
We are looking at the concentration camp. We never been there.
Did I say I did?
See the concentration camp in the
Doña, pero ¿y esta vaina?
Thank you.
Pero
The-
yo no he visto...
The gentleman in the red shirt.
Pero doña, yo no he visto Mongolia y yo te digo que
you
existe.
and Douglas.
Yo te puedo decir que esa vaina existe, man. Y... No, pero...
Go ahead, the gentleman in the red shirt.
Very good overview, big picture. Everybody knows, basically what has gone on for hundreds of years. But I write an online column, and this week I wrote on this subject. And I had a hard time finding out, the devil in the details. Because, for example, I think it wasn't the nation or another publication that said that 280,000 Haitians tried to regularize their status, but the government only recognized 10,000 as having the appropriate papers. Now why? Well, they never issued them birth certificates. There was, in other words, this refusal to recognize Dominican Haitians as Dominicans was already implicit in the way that they would function by not giving people. Then these regularization centers had no resources. And now I read in reading the Dominican press and so forth and so on, that the Army and the Migration Department have struck a deal where the Army, where the concentration camps are, the Army has ceded Army facilities on the border
The forts.
for the Migration Department to take the Haitians there. So all you need to find out is where these military installations
The forts are, yeah.
and that's where they're going to be placed.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
but I think it's...
If you could wrap up your comment, there's other people.
Well,
Thank you.
The only thing I'm going to say is, Mayor Bill de Blasio of New York blasted this and said, why don't we have a boycott of tourism? Dominican Republic is vulnerable. They depend tremendously on tourism. It's one of the three pillars, remittances and so forth. And
Thank you.
If
Thank you so much.
they decide not to go, they're going to have to...
We have I have to get somebody from this side, but the gentleman in the striped and Daniel, thank you. And then up over here we'll have the two of you.
All right, I want to thank you guys for Diaz and Elwidge. I'm kind of late, so I didn't get the whole focus, but my two questions are, are you part of a organized effort in Miami, the MWC, to put this issue on a grassroots level to make sure that we mobilize the support for Miami, and how did you get in contact with you somehow?
That's great.
The other issue is...
I like that question.
The other issue is in respect to the African Union, because I see this as a major racist issue. In the long run, it's all about humanism, because at the end, that's it. That's the position we need to take. Any human being in the world needs to look at this issue, and it's pretty clear that, you think we would be more progressive than this at this stage where race is
Thank you.
such a central issue. But is the African Union getting involved, and is the United Nations, have they put it front and center? I don't really see a lot in the press, but it would be possible.
I'm not sure we have a response on that. We'll have to get back to you. Daniel?
Well, to answer the question about where the concentration camps are, I think if anyone visit a bucket, this is a concentration camp. Because this is where the most extreme type of exploitation exists. Now, the other point is I think it'll be totally wrong if we look only at Dominican Republic. The question started in Haiti itself. What happened in Haiti is the failure of capitalism. We have a situation where the reason that we migrate, because I'm from Haiti, I'm Haitian, I'm not of Haitian descent. I was born in Haiti, raised in Haiti. And the reason I came here and other people went to Santo Domingo, it is because Haiti cannot sustain us. Two reasons: the failure of capitalism, and not only occupation, but the domination of Haiti by imperialism. If we want to build muscle, really if we want to build muscle, we have to build an anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist mass movement. This is what happened in both social commitments. And the only way, only way out is for the Haitian masses to stand up and overthrow their own dominant classes in Haiti, and for the Dominican masses to stand up and overthrow their own dominant classes in the Dominican Republic. Or else, we just, like they say in Haiti, we are beating water to make butter.
Thank you, Daniel. We're going to give the word to the sister, and then we'll come here to the two other people. The sister in the orange? The green. Yeah.
I am also Haitian. I agree 100% with what he said. It kind of has a lot to do with what I wanted to say. I think my concern is creating a movement that's going to stick. When the earthquake happened, everyone raised money. Everyone sent, donations. They sent clothes, and, we're going to help Haiti, and Haiti's worst off right now. How do we create a movement that's going to stick? How do we get our brothers and our sisters in Haiti to actually care and stand up? How do we get other people to boycott the DR or to do whatever? I think my concern is doing something that's going to matter, that's going to stick. Instead of getting, eventually we donate, we do this, a couple months later, this is on the back burner and we forget. And something else happens. So I think that's something, I don't know if it was already discussed, but that's my concern.
Yeah, we'll transition to an action conversation shortly. The two.
Yes. Well, I'm Dominican, and I want to say that we, Dominican and Haitian, are brothers and sisters. We have an island, and we live in an island, and we have to live there. I mean, I'm here. The Dominican and Haitians that cannot be out, they need to live in that island. We try to hyperbolize or exaggerate and put Haitians and Dominican confrontation, we are going nowhere. Nowhere. My suggestion, long time that I've been trying to do this, the Dominican Republic, just leave it, is to create, and this is something that needs to happen. What we need is a strong Haiti, strong government, strong that works in Haiti for Haiti.
Thank you.
We need not only that, we need to have a coalition to look for resources and really ring the bell for the United States and the international community to really bring help to Haiti, to bring companies, manufacture, whatever. And we need investments in Haiti. We need a different policy, immigration policy here in the United States. Every time I see on TV.
You have a
that
three-second
five-
warning.
You have a ship with 5 Haitians, and the American
Gracias.
coast take the Haitians, a bottle of water and a little piece of bread, and put it back right there. That
Gracias.
is unfair.
Gracias.
Yeah, I agree with
That is
what he's saying.
unfair. And the United States, yes. That is unfair. And we need something to happen here in the United States. This is the greatest and the richest country on earth.
Thank you. Go ahead. I'd like to hear some of the sisters' voices, and I'm going to recognize the one in the blue after you. Go ahead.
Yo.
Okay, so it's clear that the government of the Dominican Republic has decided to hide behind this sort of legalistic, structuralistic sort of.
Does that sound familiar to you?
Right.
Yeah.
A little tiny bit. So what that does is essentially ties everybody's hands, and it becomes an issue of sovereignty. And short of people marching into Hispaniola, which is also not unprecedented, what are for Roman, correct? Okay. What are the specific legal, structural things that a U.S. government, provided they want to do anything, which is another long shot, what are the specific legal, structural things, pressures they can place upon the respective governments in order to untie the deadlock and to kind of let them know, you can't be doing this?
You wanted me to address it now? Yeah, briefly, we're going to talk a little bit about some action items and proposals, and I'm interested in hearing from the fellow panelists and other people here. First and foremost, stop making believe that it's not occurring. One, we've had 2 State of the Union addresses, not one reference to it. I was on a congressional panel yesterday with Congressman Wilson, and I applaud her for at least addressing this issue. But when I pushed her to get the Congressional Black Caucus and others to get hearings, the response was, well, I spoke to the leaders in Haiti and the Dominican. That's not enough. Shed light to darkness, first and foremost. Bring forth hearings. Make rumblings of an economic impact in terms of tourism and trade. And I bet you overnight, all of a sudden, we got a lot more Dominicans than we had yesterday in terms of citizens. At least the talk, the threat of the economic power is just one solution. And get it, using our political and economic power is one of those steps.
Great. I'm going to invite people when they speak to state their name and if they have an organization so that we can start getting to know each other a little bit. So the sister in the blue, and then Ruth, and then the brother. Oh, okay. There is a sea of hands, and there's nothing that makes us happier. And we would love to have this conversation every week, right here.
Just go ahead, man.
Good.
If you say it's quick, I believe you.
Speak up.
You said Haiti was occupied. That was one of the statements. You said it was occupied by the U.S. So they basically running things in Haiti right now. I want to ask you, is it willingly or was it an act of I'm taking this mind and you can't do nothing about it?
Well, I think better minds than me can answer that right at this table.
I think you could answer that.
I just want to know because if something is occupied and it's not occupied by willingly, it's not willingly occupied, it's forcibly occupied. If y'all know something is forcibly occupied and they trying to get out of that prison and go to something that's a little bit better than us, why is it given who is the best option?
Oh, we agree, we hear you.
There are vast areas of the globe that are occupied, and there's vast areas of our mind that are colonized. The oppression is both ways. So occupation is forced and invited because of internalized, colonized or internalized oppression. That's my quick comment. Ruth, and then the sister in the black, and then the brother in the blue. And I want to invite you to start thinking about the implications of what's happening there for our movement here of Black Lives Matter and bringing the centrality of that resistance that's happening right now.
My name is Ruth, and I am with Florida New Majority, and an issue that I would like to see the panelists discuss is how women and children are being affected by the discrimination and the mass purging, and what the implications would be of sending families of women, and children that hardly know their country back to Haiti. If you guys could go ahead and address that.
I mean, I think a lot of these things are super self-evident. And I think it's, for me at least, it's important to think about it in a way that yields up new details, I think what's important to think about and to remember is that one of our sort of assumptions in a place like the United States doesn't apply in a place like the Dominican Republic, and which is that in Santo Domingo, citizenship is a commodity. Like it's a commodity. The amount of money that you need to pay to be able to make it happen, even if, let's say, under the best circumstances, is utterly prohibitive. The average person who's living in the countryside can't afford to go to the bureaucratic centers and can't afford to pay that kind of paperwork. And who are we talking about? We're talking about usually mothers with children. And that when citizenship becomes a commodity, when you've got to pay a certain amount of money, the people who are overwhelmingly impacted are women with children. Because if you think about who in the world is going to be the most isolated, especially in a place like Santo Domingo. And I just think that one of the really crazy things that we keep like having a circle around is that even under the best circumstances, folks who are poor, who are rural, would be incredibly hard-pressed to meet any of the criteria. And so it literally, Santo Domingo didn't even need the Dominican Republic, this terrifying government, could have literally just crossed his arms. Because this thing is so set up. And of course, what do you do with, even the issue of, so let's say, same issue here, like what happens if, let's just say we gain citizenship we reverse the idea and the people who are already citizens stick with their citizenship. Well, a lot of them have family who are themselves undocumented. And it's the same thing we've been living in the United States, which is the United States separates families like it's nothing. So I don't think there's anything new here. I think it's...
Yeah, and migratory populations have always had this split, right? Like what Junot's saying is that, once the women have many children, then the kind of work that they're able to do is limited. So often, on the batey, the women might stay behind on these bateys, which are no longer functioning the way they used to, because a batey used to be primarily a sugarcane plantation, and then the economy shifted a lot from agricultural to service and tourism, and so the men leave and go to Santo Domingo to work in construction and the women are behind on the batey doing informal, they have like commerce, as you would say in Creole, so doing informal types of businesses. So of course, just like here, people are highly disadvantaged, but the women and children suffer, and the children suffering the most because they're not allowed to go to school. So you have this cycle where nobody gets out.
Thank you.
Just following off of that, speaking, my name is Diane. I'm an economist organizer here in Miami, and I'm a registered therapist. I've worked in the back and I'm just wondering why the conversation hasn't, really tackled this issue of exploited black labor, regardless if it's Haitian or Dominican. Because if you're working in the bateys and you have a Spanish last name, you're Haitian. And I'm curious as to why, we're not articulating this into a position where holding, or we're critiquing the Dominican government as a means of reparation, as in they need to give these people citizenship because basically they stole them. And the Haitians are the ones, the Haitian government under Trujillo, the ones that made these contracts and were pushing these bodies within the Dominican Republic. So I guess that's my question, like why aren't we articulating it in a sense of talking about labor and exploited black labor instead of getting into this rhetoric of, nationalism, which I feel like diverts from like the actual situation.
Thank you.
I think it's all connected because the labor, most of the people were there in the first place because they were invited initially to work in these sugarcane fields from going back as far as Gulf and Western. And then they were eventually sold. During the whole dictatorship, people could be picked up in Port-au-Prince and find themselves in the Dominican Republic. So I think the labor has been exploited on both sides. And people, and this idea of sort of like labor being in transit is that they want to, you want to squeeze everything out of you, and then you should go home. That was the dream. But then people, then the labor is when it's no longer needed, it's suddenly inconvenient. I mean, that happens everywhere, but especially on these bateys that are now almost ghost towns when the sugar cane is gone.
Yeah, and I think we tried to make reference to the economic systems and the extractive economies, et cetera. And the reality is that our economic system is created by a political class. And it can be changed, it can be reformed. And in the same way that migration is used to feed certain economic interests because it creates a disposable labor. So when they want, they invite workers into the sugar fields. They invite workers into the railroad. They invite workers into XYZ industry. And when they don't want, they expel, deport, or incarcerate a disposable labor force so that they can manipulate an economy. And I think that's how it works, even though I'm not an economist. But it seems like that's something that we experience. It's our world. It's our communities, it's our laws, it's our economy, and until we awaken to that, it's gonna continue to be exploitative. So let's bring it back to Miami and blackness, and see what we can gain from this moment and this conversation to continue building that social movements towards that. So I'm inviting those comments, Badilli, and then the brother in the blue.
As a kind of segue, I'm African American. I lived in the Dominican Republic in 91 and 92. And I saw Haitians being picked up and deported. I was mistaken for Dominican and Haitian. So I had to always carry my passport. So it's and to be careful as I go near the frontier. So I want to kind of like question the internalized racism that I definitely experienced when I lived in the Dominican Republic, and also experienced amongst Afro-descendant Latinos here in the United States, which sometimes seems to be a barrier in terms of building that kind of unity between people who are a little bit more affirming of their Afro descent and those who kind of either deny it or denigrate it.
Thank you.
I don't necessarily have a question. I have a comment. I am of Haitian descent. And I find that it's ironic. The first country outside of the Western world that really fought for independence and offered democracy is now the country that has perfected its plan on separation. I think that is fundamentally what's happening, and that us as a people, especially you in Miami, being a loud speak of culture, we need to get to that. Us now, the beef between the Dominican versus the Haitian is all about separation of people. One speaks Spanish, one speaks French.
Creole.
That's the biggest difference between
Thank you.
Us as Miami should work together.
Thank you. Wow, we're really running out of time. I'm going to give the sister who hasn't spoken in black, and then the sister in green who hasn't spoken, and then we want to be able to wrap it up by 8.
Thank you. My name is Myra, and I guess my question dealing with Miami is, I've been really trying to figure out, like, how do you raise consciousness in a city where 60% is Hispanic? As many of the panelists mentioned, you really don't have to care if you don't want to, because what's at stake isn't necessarily directly affecting you. For me, I'm from Chicago, so I have a different sort of racial identity. But coming to Miami, I think it was a very jarring experience to try and like reconfigure my own racial identity. And so, in terms of like building movement, how do we get our Hispanic brothers and sisters to really understand that they're affected by this, even though in this particular space that might not be the case, because to be Hispanic is to be white here.
That is the key question for us. And I don't know if we can go into it, but I can just say from the Florida Immigrant Coalition's perspective, we've had different attempts, and we have to continue trying for us to really talk about race within the Latino community, within the immigrant community. Just yesterday, we talked about it's not Latino and black. There's plenty of black Latinos, and let's talk about that. The power dynamics in this town are very different than in any other place, but I encourage you to join our social movements in whatever organizations we're working collaboratively around criminalization, and to advance and name this anti-blackness and this racism that is imbued in our culture. So the sister in the green.
Yes, hi, good evening. My name is Chikachi Etu. I'm a professor and a journalist. Thank you all for being here. So my question is kind of for the professor, for the two of you as well. The thing that gets me about us in academia is we spend so much time writing about these things that we do nothing about them. In fact, I can't say that there are no professors in here, but I bet you the people who teach this are not here. How do we, as academics, merge with the actual, real lay people instead of
Yeah, please.
You know, I want to answer these questions because they're actually falling into a genre. Yeah? And the genre is whatever the group, can we get them to be more active? But how can we get them to be more active in the way we want them to be fucking active? And no, for real, and I understand the longing for it. Because everyone has got their group who they're just like, yo, you fucking suck. Like, I wish you were more fucking awake like me. Right? But I think that this is very important to recall, and why I think this is very valuable. I think we often stress the fact that our basic conditions are our basic conditions. Yes, the majority of whatever collective we're talking about are asleep. That shit ain't changed. In recent memory, I don't remember a situation where there were more whatever X that were more like active. There are communities where there's a lot of activism. People in the Bay, folks in New York, there's places in Chicago. Yeah, there's places that are more. But all of us have been in a space where there's like the standard activism, where there's a couple people doing all the work, everybody else is fucking taking a nap. So my thing is just simple. It's that if we spend less energy thinking, like my thing is that, look, gang, this has always been a faith-based activity. This has always been something completely predicated that it is us against all odds. And the fundamental belief that the solidarity and faith of few can alter the destiny of nations. That has always been the case. I know. I know we want more solidarity. I know we want more people. I know we want more sisters with us. I know we want more brothers with us. But the reality is that is actually part of the process. It comes because we keep doing our work, and you know this, all strategies simultaneously. All strategies simultaneously. The idea that there is one strategy that is somehow going to lead us to the promised land is just absurd. Somebody wants to articulate, this young sister over here was asking, well, why don't we articulate, yes, we need that strand going. But we also need strands that are going that are actually on the ground in very very practical ways. Because guys, by the time we get the Caribbean literate in the idea of reparations, there will be not a single fucking Haitian anywhere near anywhere. And so there's a couple of things, but we have to keep that going because we never know where like 6 or 7 years down the line, that conversation becomes the most important conversation. That the thing that we thought wasn't ever going to be relevant suddenly becomes everything we need. Yes. And my thing is less trying to convert everybody Borg-like into following our same strategy. Keep doing what we're doing and drag, yes, as many people in as you can, because that's important. Keep going with the conversations. Those of you who are not in any kind of community group, you got to put in a couple hours a week. It doesn't make any difference. Find your fucking community group. And that isn't going to, listen, that's not going to hurt our cause. Everybody giving an extra hour isn't going to hurt us.
Thank you. We're going to invite the panelists to do a few closing thoughts and then inform on the call to action.
Look, I think for me, very simply put, what has been said here, it is obvious that there are many places where the sort of the cabal that is implementing this are very vulnerable. There's on the issue of tourism. Many of these leaders, Leonel Fernandez, many of these leaders, Danilo Medina, they enjoy coming to the United States to talk shit. Anytime they're in the country and you know they're coming and you've been part of an organization, go over there and cause trouble for them. Every person who belongs to a news organization or knows a reporter should ask just some basic questions. Everybody who's part of a national group should write a letter to their embassy and say, why is our nation going to the Dominican Republic to hold hands next year? Why is this happening? In every little way, we keep chipping away. Every time you put a Facebook post, every time you keep it alive. And if, again, I just want to remind people that I know look, I'm of African descent, you guys. On both sides of my family, I might not look it, but I am. And yet I can still tell you that it is not only black bodies that this is happening to. The fucking Mexican border, all those poor Asian boat folks, like, we must continually awaken in ourselves our ability to have the capacity to just live other people's oppressions. Because this is the way it happens. If I'm calling for this to end in Santo Domingo, I better be thinking about people who look nothing like me, who are going through the same shit, and I want to circulate their information, yo. And it ain't gonna work any other way. It just is not gonna work any other way. Like, if you're like me, if you ain't got some shit happening in other sectors, try to figure it out. If you don't know what's happening to Asian bodies across the planet, to indigenous women across the planet, every time we learn a little bit, it helps that muscle which makes us capable of being the people that we're going to need to be to tear the head off of this one.
A sort of a lesser reported aspect of the sentencia, right before this constitutional decision, there was a scuffle on the border between Haiti and the Dominican Republic over bird flu and poultry and eggs. And suddenly this decision surfaced. And the people who were, going back to your labor question, the people who, there are two families who run sort of the sugar trade in the Dominican Republic. And one of them, the Funhals, the brothers, were just stripping the humanity of people who were working their sugar canes here. And they were treating them very similarly to the way people were being treated who were working in their cane fields in the Dominican Republic. The U.S. gives one of its largest subsidies for for sugar, to the Dominican Republic. And these families, the Funhals, they benefit from it. So every time you put a little sugar in your coffee, think about that. And think about these people who have been, like Voltaire said, that they're drinking, you're drinking your sugar with our blood in it. And so I think Junot's right to think about these economics of it too. The Haitian diaspora, I'm sad to say, is sometimes the biggest violators of this. We adore our sort of Dominican vacations, and it's very hard to pry from that from them. And I think we have to start thinking about that ourselves, just starting in the community where we live, how we are spending our money to make these choices from your sugar to your vacation, to think about what's being done in your name, what you're subsidizing, and what your presence means, what your absence means. And I think that's a very would be a good place to begin.
Well, I want to close in two parts, but before I do that, I want to just say how inspiring the other two substantive panelists, as well as the moderators, were in terms of these issues. And just to remind myself never to debate Mr. Diaz. And I wonder if he's going to run for president. That may be a new movement afoot.
I'm depressive.
But more importantly, a few things. And I know for the most part, I suspect that is largely preaching to the converted here. Let's assume you're not. Let's assume every single person in this room believes everything that was said here was a lie. Let's assume there are no concentration camps. Let's assume the United States hasn't done enough. Let's assume there's exploitation at every angle. Just remember one thing. Wake up tomorrow and realize you do not have a country and you do not have rights. There is no defensible position anyone, and I welcome them, be it the consulate or any newspaper or anywhere, happily debate them anywhere at any place, okay? I would say other things, but I'll leave it just there. In terms of these issues, what would you do? How would you respond? Who would you look to? Well, look to people like us. Look at the number of people in this room that have access to social media, that have access, and I appreciate your frustration in terms of in terms of your colleagues and institutions. I know for a fact I don't have a colleague in here, and I know for a fact every single one of them received an email and an announcement, let alone a student, in terms of this. But the fact of the matter, we all know people. We all have family, probably family, including myself, that are depressed to hear they're having vacations in the Dominican Republic in light of what's going on. Talk to them, raise these issues. Look at the work that Maria has done with the immigration movement and the efforts of Dreamers. Largely a handful of young people helped change the narrative. That haven't caused the substantive change yet, but help change the conversation in significant ways. If every single one of you wrote an email to every university president in the South Florida area, because every single one of those schools, from Miami-Dade College to Broward to my own institution, are community schools of the people. Well, you are the people. Write to them and say you were here and say you disagreed and everything Professor Rahman said was wrong, or say that you were inspired by the speakers. Have them care, have them listen. Write to your congressman, email them. Hate Radio does it. Right? We got a few little rednecks that have some enormous impact in terms of stopping comprehensive immigration. Engage in those efforts. Cause some change. You each
When I've worked on campaigns and I think there's going to be 100 or 200, like I see here, and there's 6 people, I say, okay, we don't have a campaign rally, we have a caucus. So let's make us a caucus of 200 and get together and start writing and start pushing people to raise these issues. As the fellow speaker said, when other people come, there are ways to affect, and that's the only thing we can do. Just keep on.
So there's a few things I wanted to share in terms of invitations for next steps. Tomorrow we are walking, going to the street, marching, holding not just the Dominican consulate, but also the Haitian consulate accountable. It's at 2 o'clock, 1038 Brickell Ave, and ending at 259 Southwest 13th Street. I want to acknowledge that there's a lot of organizations here. You can just shout out. I want to recognize the Power U, who's been leading the work on school to prison pipeline and health and basically liberation. The Dream Defenders, who've been calling the question on state violence and Black Lives Matter. Florida New Majority, who's building an electoral force so that our social movements can move in that arena. The labor movement, I see the AFL and the SCIU, and there might be others. I want to acknowledge Haitian Women of Miami, our previous board chair, who's been at the forefront, Marlene, who's leading the march tomorrow. So many of these organizations are coming together at the end of July for a conversation, follow-up on criminalization. And it's a tent broad enough that encompasses the school-to-prison pipeline, the police killings, the detention deportation machinery, rights restoration, general exclusion. So it's another invitation. Follow the Miami Workers Center, who put this event together. Thank you, Marcia Olivo. And the board and staff of the Miami Workers Center. And follow them at Miami Workers Center. On the Haitian Women of Miami website, there's a petition that we're going to be circulating, or else you can find it in the Florida Immigrant Coalition. I think that we've expressed a lot of anger, but also love and faith and coming together. I love Junot's the possessive investment of each other's liberation. Our own individual liberation connected can create some social transformation that we need. Many peace, blessings, and we'll hopefully remain connected as a movement. Thank you.